Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and this short video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous night at the local time. We have very interesting updates from the western part of Ukraine. According to information we have, as if the situation for the Ukrainian army is going to continue the same way, and if the situation on the ground continue developing the same way, the Ukrainians will be forced to redeploy and to move their capital from Kiev to Lvov. If you remember, a few weeks ago we were talking about that the Russians launched the preparation of the next offensive operation in Ukraine that will take place in the summer of 2024, and according to upcoming offensive operation, the Russians are planning to establish control over the cities like Kharkiv and Kiev. So maybe for these purposes the Ukrainians start talking about possible redeployment of the capital of the country. Very interesting updates are coming from Kiev itself. Today we got the first confirmation that the Belgium banks took a decision, the Belgium authorities took a decision to transfer the first frozen assets of Russian Federation to Ukraine. We're talking about 611 millions of dollars, of euro, and this is not like the assets that are frozen, let's say, when talking about like the details, because as we know, there are around 180 billions are frozen in Belgium, and we are talking about the let's say percentages from the deposits that's located in Belgium. Also a very big amount of money. Now we are moving to Kharkiv direction. During the previous night, the Russians made few more strikes against Ukrainian positions and concentration of forces in the city, yet we haven't received any details about those strikes. The clashes along the border continues. The Russians published another series of video how they were bombing and attacking the temporary positions of the Ukrainians, the barracks of Ukrainians, the concentration of Ukrainian forces. So as you can see, the clashes and artillery duels in this area are intensifying, and the Russians continue publishing more and more videos from this direction. If you remember, just yesterday we were talking about possible Russian crossing the border and entering the village by the name of Pletyonovka, and a lot of Russian sources were spreading this piece of news, but today we haven't received any confirmation, and we still haven't received any confirmation. Furthermore, some Russian sources have already reported that that piece of news was like a speculation or something like this. Once again, if we increase the numbers of this since the beginning of January, we see how heavy clashes are here. The artillery duels are very heavy, and we see that there are almost nothing from the Ukrainian side, no counter-artillery duels, just the Russians attacks, and no Ukrainian counter-attacks from artillery forces. Now we are moving to the situation on the ground. We haven't received anything from the newly created Russian foothold on the south of Kislovka-Kotlerovka. The only thing we have is Ukrainian FPV drone strike against the Russian infantry who was moving along the field. We can use this video probably to adjust some, let's say, positions of the Russian army. Very difficult to understand where exactly the Russian soldiers were moving, but anyway, just this small triangle we can mark as the territory under Russian control. Just a small improvement, and very difficult to understand what exactly is going on there. After Russian progress, there is operational pause. Now we are moving to Lyman direction. We have interesting updates from this territory. We have published video either from the Russian and from the Ukrainian side. As I understand, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians launched another offensive operation. The Russians managed to attack and to establish control over the gray zone on these areas. They managed to improve their positions by capturing few more trenches and fortifications, and we have a few geolocated videos. For example, on this video we can see one of Russian attack in direction of Terny. Russian tank and personnel armored carrier were moving along the fields. The Russian tank was attacking the Ukrainian positions, probably also was demining the minefields in front of the personnel carrier. As you can see on this video, the Russians got the let's say some positions, their tank stopped, and then we see how the infantry landed in this area and started clearing the trenches. So the video we just shown us the next situation. The Russian tank armored convoy was moving something like this. Then the Russian tank stopped here, and the Russian infantry landed in this area and started clearing the trenches. So this video shows us that probably this territory doesn't correspond, this configuration of the front line of the map doesn't correspond to the reality, and very likely that this territory is under Ukrainian control. We will adjust the map showing this territory as a gray zone, because like the Russians just, let's say, entered these three lines. The same story took place almost on the southern direction. The Russians maintained the gray zone and entered the tree line. Probably they just tried to shorten the, let's say, distance before the further offensive operation. But the movements of the Russian forces were discovered by the Ukrainian forces, and the Ukrainians launched a counter-offensive operation using armored fist, using three tanks, and using 3 tanks, 1, 2, and 3. The Ukrainians were bombing the Russian positions along that tree line. After the Ukrainians were out of ammo, they successfully left the territory without losses among the armored vehicles and tanks. So the story was as follows: the Russians captured this tree line, trying to improve their positions. Probably they were planning to prepare themselves before further offensive operation in direction of the forest that located to the northwest of the original position. But very likely something went wrong. The Russian positions were discovered, and the Ukrainians sent tank, let's say, as a reinforcement and as a counterattack. So the Ukrainians from this area entered the fields. Somewhere from these positions, from the fields, the Ukrainians attack within a distant Russian positions, and after they complete the fire, the Ukrainians successfully retreated and returned back to the base in direction of Yampolovka, and the Ukrainians successfully retreated. So that was the battle. So those were the clashes and the battles that took place in front of Terny, Yampolovka. One video was published by the Russian side, another video was published by the Ukrainians. Very likely today we're going to receive more details from this territory. When talking about Solidar, we haven't received anything. The same situation about Bogdanovka, Bakhmut, Artyomovsk, we haven't received anything, just some updates about clashes in the vicinity of Ivanovska, Bogdanovka, but without any geolocated confirmations of any progress. Now we are moving to Avdiivka. We have adjusted the map along the railways in front of Ocheretina. If you remember, yesterday we discussed that the Ukrainians counterattack and managed to restore positions in this area, and this information was confirmed by different mappers. And we have interesting updates from Avdiivka itself. First of all, let's take a look at this video. This video shows us how the terrain and the surface of the ground have been changing since for the previous 10 days. For example, on this video we can see the 23rd of January. As you can see, there is like this is 13 and this 23rd. Once again, as you can see, on the 13th, when the area was covered with snow, we don't see any funnels of let's say shell strikes, artillery strikes. And on the 23rd of January, we see that the territory is completely covered with the black dots, which means like artillery funerals. When talking about the common situation, according to information we have, the Ukrainians continue counterattacks, and the situation was described as following. If you remember, we discussed about the Russians, some special operation, how the Russians managed to bypass underground the area using the pipeline and to enter the northern part of the southern area, and the Russians managed to establish the foothold along Sabornaya, Sportivnaya and Chernyshevskaya Street, and the Russians managed to block the Ukrainian forces to the south of this area. And according to the situation that was described the previous night, there are a lot of Ukrainian positions and a lot of Ukrainian forces that are encircled. So there are still Ukrainians among these 3 lines. There are still Ukrainians along the railways. As I understand, currently the Ukrainians have their positions probably here. Very likely the Ukrainians still have their positions somewhere here, and these parts of Ukrainian forces are encircled and blocked by the Russians. So there is a cauldron. So basically there is a cauldron in the southern part of Avdiivka, and according to information we have, during the previous night and during the previous days, the Ukrainians were trying to counterattack the Russian forces that located along Sabornaya, Sportivnaya, Chernyshevskaya Street. For now, the Ukrainians still haven't managed to achieve any results. All those attacks were repelled by the Russians. Meanwhile, the Russian forces from the south are trying to continue their offensive operation, trying to destroy the Ukrainian forces in these, let's say, strongholds and these small concentrations of forces. And the Ukrainians don't have possibilities to move. There are like few options for them: to surrender or, let's say, to fight till the last Ukrainian. And according to information we have, during the the previous 2 days of clashes, let's say not of clashes, during the previous 2-3 days of deblocking operation from the Ukrainian side, they have already lost up to 1 battalion. So as we understand, the Ukrainians are not counting their losses. They understand the value of this offensive operation, and also some sources are saying that the Russians also managed to encircle not just the regular infantry, regular defense forces, let's say somewhere along the railways. Also, according to information we have, the Russians managed to encircle the Ukrainian officers, very high officers, and some headquarters, let's say, of southern Avdiivka defense belt. So the clashes continues. The Russian forces that are moving from the south still haven't managed to clear the Ukrainian, let's say, resistant forces from the south. Obviously today they will continue, but from the other side, the Ukrainians from the north still haven't managed to penetrate the Russians defense belt along the Soborno, Chernyshevsk and Sportivny Street, and of course to the north of Tsarskaya Khota fortification. Also, additional sources reported that the Russians continue their movements from Kamyanka to the south. We haven't still received any updates about any clashes for these strongholds. So as you can see, the situation is getting worse and worse for the Ukrainians on the southern part. Interesting updates are coming in the area between Severna, Utoninka and Vadiana. The Ukrainian sources published a video of FPV drone strikes, and 53rd Mechanized Brigade published the video of FPV drone strikes and artillery strikes against the Russian forces in this area. So as we can see, according to this video, according to this geolocation, with some progress of the Russian army, very likely the Russians made few attempts to attack somewhere here, and as we can see, very likely the Russians managed to get some results. So we will adjust at least this part of the map as a territory under Russian control. We haven't received anything from Krasnogorovka, Marinka. The only updates we have is that the Russians also renewed their attempts to attack Pobeda, and today the Russians published the video of Russian tank who was attacking the Ukrainian positions in Pobeda with T-90 tank. As a result of those attacks, the Russians managed to suppress and to pin down some Ukrainian forces. Very likely soon, maybe even today, we're going to receive more updates about, let's say, ground operation with infantry. But for now, just attacks with artillery, with tanks against the Ukrainian forces. If we increase the numbers of updates for the previous few days, in the same area, we have already received the video and geolocated photo of destroyed Russian tank T-90 on the same road, which confirms that this is not something that the Russians have started just today or yesterday. This is an ongoing process that started probably a week or two ago, and for now the Russians still haven't managed to penetrate the Ukrainian defense belt in the vicinity of Pobeda and the strongholds around this settlement. We haven't received anything from Vremivka tactical bridgehead, from Zaporozhye, as well as from Krynky. The only report we have is that Ukrainians still controls a part of the village, or at least the buildings or maybe farms along the Kazachelagerskaya Konka, but as we can see, due to the fact that there is almost nothing, no activity from this area, we can make a conclusion that the Russians are no longer interested in removing this foothold or in finishing of this foothold due to very low level of Ukrainian infantry on this bank of the river and very high price that they're gonna pay if they start any offensive operation on this direction. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.